politicians at both the federal and state levels keep announcing plans which they say will fix the housing crisis. And the people at the coalface of the housing industry shake their head at yet another press conference which demonstrates that politicians on all sides of the political spectrum simply don't understand the problems and fail to address the core issues. Whether it's the state government or the federal opposition, or various state governments and their state oppositions, they all think that simply building more dwellings fixes all the problems. They all overlook the fundamental issues, including the inability of the housing construction industry to deliver those housing targets because it doesn't have the personnel, because of bureaucratic roadblocks, and because of the incredibly high cost of building, not helped by the ever-increasing taxes, fees and charges imposed on the business of creating new homes. Now here are the key issues that the politicians don't understand. The cost of building new dwellings in Australia is incredibly high, which means new homes are unaffordable to many. The next point is that the high cost of creating new homes has been caused by politicians and their policies, including their ever-increasing taxes. The next one, the industry doesn't have the capacity to build the number of homes the politicians say they want, because building businesses are going broke at the rate of 8 per day and because of this serious shortage of tradespeople. Then we have the high cost of building homes, including apartments, which means that planned projects are financially unviable because buyers can't afford those prices. And we have a shortage of landlords in Australia. We need more homes owned by investors and made available to households who choose to rent or need to rent. And we have a shortage of landlords because of years of bad decisions by politicians, particularly state politicians, who have made the business of being a landlord increasingly unattractive. Now, the Australian Financial Review newspaper said in a recent article that both Labor and the Coalition will miss ambitious targets to address Australia's housing crisis. It quoted a Business Outlook report from Deloitte Access Economics, which said that the federal government will probably deliver fewer than 1 million new homes by 2029, which is at least 200,000 below its promised target over 5 years. Now, I think that's a very generous assessment because most observers believe the federal government will fall at least 400,000 homes short of its target of building 1.2 million new homes in 5 years. Deloitte Access Economics says the housing crisis will get much worse before it gets better. House prices will need to increase before the necessary boost to supply can be delivered profitably. Housing Industry Association research has found that the target of 1 million new homes within 5 years will require a 50% increase on current construction levels. To meet its promise, Labor needs to average 240,000 new homes to be built each year. But Australia's never built that number of homes in a year, and last year only 173,000 homes were completed. The HIA report says the industry does not have the required workforce capacity to get close, finding about 30% more tradies are needed. Deloitte partner Stephen Smith says the lack of skilled construction workers is a key driver of the housing shortage. Build Skills Australia, the federal government's jobs and skills agency, estimates that 90,000 workers are required. And Smith says, with permanently high construction costs, the sector will be both unwilling and unable to lift supply unless property prices also lift. That is, a housing affordability, he says, will get worse before it has a hope of getting better. Now, HIA senior economist Matt King says the workforce shortages have been caused in part by the nation's big infrastructure build. He says the new home building industry is competing for workers with commercial construction activity as well as a massive pipeline of infrastructure projects. But perhaps the biggest killer is the increasingly high cost of building new homes. To give you an idea of how much it costs to create new homes on very small blocks of land, consider this. For many years, the cheapest place to find residential properties amongst the capital cities of Australia has been the northern suburbs of Adelaide, specifically the Playford local government area. Politicians recently made a big splash about the availability of new housing allotments there, which are as small as 270 square metres. That's a quarter the size of the traditional quarter-acre block, for only 220,000, and it costs more for blocks that are a little bit larger than that very small size. Given that the cost of building your average boring brick and tile house is around $500,000, thanks to new layers of costs from all levels of government, the cost of a new house and land package in the cheapest market in capital city Australia is now well above $700,000. And this is what the politicians like to call affordable housing. Here's another example. Halfway between Brisbane and the key regional city of Toowoomba is the local government area of Lockyer Valley, one of the nation's most important food bowl areas. The region also has a university campus, a major prison, and is close to one of the nation's biggest RAF bases. So there's lots of factors generating housing demand. The long-established Lockyer Valley towns like Gatton and Laidley have older housing which have median prices in the 400,000s. The new development areas with modern housing estates have median prices between 700,000 and 800,000. In the city of Melton, on the outer western fringe of Greater Melbourne, you see similar outcomes. New suburbs with modern houses have high median prices like 850,000 in Burnside Heights and 750,000 in Fraser Rise. But the long-established suburbs, by contrast, have much lower median prices like 505,000 in Melton South and 545,000 in Kurrajong. So you'll find similar price disparities all over Australia. Now, Victoria is the state that is the most hostile to the housing industry and in particular to investors, and the most blinkered when it comes to dealing with the core housing issues around shortages and affordability. The Victorian State Government has just announced new zones for building high-rise apartments as part of its press conference target of 800,000 homes over a decade, a level of construction that has never been achieved before. Well, Macro Business pointed out in a recent article saying, just because the Victorian government has rezoned these areas for high-rise, it doesn't mean that more homes will be built, nor will it make housing more affordable. Under this new plan, developers will be forced to pay a new charge to fund schools, parks and public transport, with the state government set to trial the fee in the first 10 of its so-called activity centres. In other words, in the same breath as announcing a policy to create lots of affordable dwellings, they've added to the cost of building them and thereby made dwellings less affordable by imposing yet another new tax on the industry. Housing experts warned that these new apartment complexes will not be viable unless there is a substantial rise in the average price of apartments. Property industry analyst Chada Kramer argue that apartment prices will need to rise at least 15% to encourage developers to build the new high-density homes. However, this will price apartments above what many buyers are willing or able to afford. And Richard Temlett of Chada Kramer says, because building costs have jumped by 30 to 40%, sale prices will have to be about 30% higher compared to pre-pandemic levels. And that means that even with these incentives in place, certain projects will still not be financially viable. Property developer Max Schiffman commented on this by saying, "I'm the chief executive of an established property development business, the kind of company that Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen is appealing to in her push to build more mid-level and high-rise apartments in the activity centres of established suburbs." But he says, we won't be building these sorts of apartments anytime soon. Why not? Because this sort of a development is not feasible to build and sell and won't be for a while yet. Schiffman says it costs at least 3 times as much to build a square metre of a new apartment compared to a good quality townhouse, or 4 times more than a new detached home. This means that the only apartments that generate a suitable return on investment are premium boutique apartments targeted on wealthy downsizers. He said construction costs translate into a small 1-bedroom apartment costing about $650,000, a 2-bedroom apartment at nearly $1 million, and a reasonably sized 3-bedroom family apartment at $1.5 million or more. And he says these are not prices that are attainable to the bulk of medium income earners, let alone first home buyers and lower income earners. The apartment market, he says, is now almost entirely skewed towards premium downsizer apartments, with entry-level apartments all but evaporating from sale. And that's why apartment production today is less than 1/5 of the levels of a decade ago. Shipman also points out that foreign investors and Australian investors have always underpinned high-rise tower construction, but they've been discouraged from investing in Victoria by a combination of government taxes and policies. So here's what all this means. We have politicians of all colours announcing big targets for building new homes without addressing all the core underlying issues, which means their targets will never be achieved. But then I believe this never really intended for any of this to be real. Politicians never think beyond the press conference. They just want to create the impression they're doing something without taking meaningful action.